Jive Hive Jeff from Two Hacks Garage. Well, I went ahead and purchased a set of heads. I did not go something extremely expensive, and I'll explain why here in a few minutes. But the other night, I was on a live watching Dust Devil Garage. He was having his congratulatory 500 subscribers, live. And there was a big discussion on the cylinder heads made by ProComp/Speedmaster. Ken from Tall Garage, I'm giving a shout out to him because he was really pushing the fact that, hey, a lot of these cylinder heads are very similar to one another when it comes to some of the budget heads. So thanks, Ken, for pointing that out. I'm going to link his channel in the description so you can go check out what he does. He's doing something very interesting with cylinder heads. You got to go see it. Jed from Scott's Speed Shop was also talking about some of the budget oriented heads and some of the problems they do have with them. Well, I did chime in a little bit on that discussion, but I didn't really say much. And one of the reasons being is because I had already purchased a set of Speedmaster Big Block Ford heads. I am on a budget, but at the same time, I do want something that's decently quality. I did a lot of research before purchasing these heads, just to throw that out there. I'm not comparing these to anything like the AFR heads or Kazi heads or anything like that. That is way out of my budget. Just going by what's online, the Speedmaster head, it is pretty much an Edelbrock Performer RPM knockoff. So that's kind of what I'm comparing it to. I did take some notes, which we'll go over in a second. And just to preface this a little bit, this is going to be like a part one of the cylinder head review. This is more or less the numbers and just a physical review of the actual head when I got it in. Part two, I'm going to go to my machine shop guy, Jimmy, and he's going to go a little bit more in depth in these and kind of explain a few things and go over some possible upgrades, anything like that, that's what's needed. But for being a DIY garage guy, here are a few things that I did notice about these heads. First off, let's go over some of the numbers on these heads. So the stroker combo I got, in order to achieve the compression ratio that I wanted to go with, I was actually looking for something with like a 95cc head. So I got looking around. A lot of stuff, as we know, due to supply chain issues and everything else, is out of stock. Not going to happen for a while. I really liked the Edelbrock Performer RPM heads with the configuration that I wanted. However, they weren't doing stock for a while. And on top of it, they were a lot more money. So I sat there and told myself, okay, Edelbrocks are made in the US. These are made in China. Am I taking a risk? I don't know. There's a lot out on the internet that says these are bad, and there's a lot that says they're good. Here's my visual observation. First off, the combustion chambers on the Edelbrock Performer RPM head and the Speedmaster are both 95cc in the same application. Intake runner on the Speedmaster is 275, and on the Edelbrock, 292. So it's 17 cc's more, or about 6% more flow with the actual Edelbrock. The exhaust runners on the Speedmaster were 90, and the Edelbrock were 100. So that's 10 cc's more and about 11% more flow on the exhaust side. Intake diameters, both are 2.19. Perfectly fine. You can dig a little bit deeper, and it starts talking about the CNC machined combustion intake and exhaust chambers. Neither one of them had that. It's cast. Spark plug, both of them are an angle. Exhaust valve, the Speedmaster 1.71, the Edelbrock 1.76. So yes, there's about 500 difference in the exhaust one, but that's just to complement the little bit larger exhaust runner CC on the exhaust side on the Edelbrock heads. So max lift on these is really based upon like the stock spring height and stuff like that. But on the stock heads, max lift is 600 on the Speedmaster and 700 on the Edelbrock. So obviously the Edelbrock on the stock form has the advantage on that. Spring diameter, Speedmaster 1.55, Edelbrock 1.54. So the spring diameter on the Speedmasters is a little bit more round, but it's very negligible, considering a lot of times when you get these heads and you're going to get a cam, you're going to use what the manufacturer recommends anyway. And I'll get to that here in a few minutes. Both of them, as far as the rocker arms go, they're tapped for 7/16 by 20, so they're both the same. Valve guides, both of them are bronze. Both of these are cast in aluminum, So as you can see by the numbers, well, they're actually pretty comparable. And both of them do have ductile iron seats. Here's where we get into a little bit more on why I purchased these heads. Like I said, I am on somewhat of a budget. The Edelbrock heads, this is before tax and shipping, Edelbrock heads and the Edelbrock Performer RPM with a 95cc combustion chamber that I needed that were not in stock were $2,672 a pair. The Speedmaster, $1,260 a pair. So that saved me $1,412 initially, right off the bat, on going with the Speedmaster head. So, like I said, these are made in China. Everything you find online still shows that Edelbrock still casts theirs in California. Although there is some conflicting information, I don't want to say either way. But comparatively so, they're both pretty comparable heads as shown on paper. Now what I want to do is I want to show you my initial observations of these heads. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. I'm not going to get into CCing anything left or anything like that. We're going to go ahead and do that at the machine shop. This is more or less the visual check of these heads. And just so you know, I did go check out one of the Edelbrock heads yesterday that a friend of mine had, and I just went over it just to kind of see a visual comparison. So when I knew to make this video, I was getting things right on actually how it looked. So let's go ahead and let's go into a visual explanation of these heads from my perspective. Be right back. All right, so here we're going to go over a little bit on the visual inspection on these heads. Kind of what I want to do, point out, is some of the casting on it. As you can see with the actual surfaces, and I went ahead and checked a lot of these, they are flat, they are smooth, very good mating surface on these. I don't see anything wrong with that. Nice part about it is these heads all do have, just like the Edelbrocks, the factory bolt holes for accessories. Might not use them all, but at least you know you have them. So here's where I want to go just a little bit more in depth with these heads. I'm hoping the camera angle will work, but what I want to do is kind of show you what I consider some of the casting maybe flaws in my opinion on these. I know the Edelbrocks and these are both like a sand cast, but I do want to show you a couple little things on that, like right in here. So let me try to get this camera just a little bit more aligned with this head here. I'm not an expert, so just bear with me here. So right off the bat, if you take a look inside of this chamber here, if you can see, they are kind of a sand cast in there. They do look a little rough, but they're not actually bad. Putting your finger in here, I didn't really see anything that was crazy. There is a little bit sand casting lines in there. A little bit of cleanup work would probably go an absolute long way on these heads. That's going to be probably a discussion I have with my machine shop, and go from there on to see if that's kind of a route we want to go to clean things up. You know, maybe open them up a little bit more and create a little bit more flow. I'm just trying to get my camera set up here a little bit better, guys. So, like I said, these down in these holes, right in here, as you can see, there is, you know, it is sand cast. Every hole in here does have rough castings. These are not a CNC machined head. And in fact, I did notice on this one here, it is kind of rougher than most of them. It's not terrible, but if you kind of get a better look down in here, you can see they're not actually that bad. The Edelbrock ones I looked at, they were a little bit smoother, but overall, I'm not too, you know, I'm not too disappointed with these. I do believe I am going to talk to my machine shop guy and look at cleaning these up a little bit on each side. Not only to get a little bit more flow, but also just to clean that up. So, another observation on these. I'm going to flip these over here. Let's go to the intake side on these. It's kind of the same deal. If you look on the intake side of these, you can see, you know, they are also kind of just a rough casting. Not terrible, but they are rough. Now, here's what I did want to show on this surface here. Move that over. This surface is nicely machined, nice and flat. I'm not concerned at all with this here, going to mate up to the intake and all that. This is actually nice and flat. It is machined quite well. However, we're going to take here is literally just a Felpro gasket. Oh, and by the way, these are not Cobra Jet port heads. These are the factory round port heads. So what we're going to do is we're going to line this up here, and I'm going to show you something that I noticed on these heads. So while the bolt holes do line up pretty well on that, you can see upon these surfaces here and here, 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 and here in these areas, it is actually a little bit off. There is quite a bit of room where you can clean these up to get a little bit more flow in these and just, you know, gasket match it. I'm going to check this in conjunction with the tunnel ram that I did buy, but just kind of looking at it when we were at the machine shop, there is definitely some room for improvement within these to clean these up to port and gasket match them. We're going to make sure we do that on both the intake and the heads just to get that even flow between all these ports through here. But as you can see, a stock factory gasket going on these. Let me get this lined up a little bit better here. When you line this up, you do see that you do have on all of these, there's quite a bit of material left that you can open up. So while that's not terrible, it's also not the best thing. When I looked at the Edelbrocks and put this up to it, it actually seemed to be a lot better. So that's a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit of flaw on these heads. But then again, you do get what you pay for, but they do have room for improvement. Open them up, probably smooth these out a little bit in here, just to get a little bit more flow. Now, let's go to the chamber side. All right, so as you can see with these heads here, the actual chamber castings, they're not actually that bad. It's a cast design within here. We're going to actually CC all these, but just for a visual inspection, the castings really aren't that bad. They seem to be pretty consistent, not really a lot of sharp edges. The machining through here maybe could use a little bit better work, but then again, it depends how they cast it, and it's also how they manufacture them. But as you can see here, they do have stainless valves, and we're going to check those. We're going to leak check those. We're going to check all the guides. We're going to go ahead and go through them all to make sure they're correct. Now, the one thing I did notice while researching these, a lot of guys said, best thing to do with these heads is tear them down, check them. Valves are pretty decent in them. However, they say the valve springs in a lot of these are just junk. And I absolutely agree with that. Here's why I agree with that. Here is a valve spring that it comes with, okay? It is kind of lightweight. The retainer, it's okay, it's not bad. But when you look at the dampener inside of it, it actually wasn't even seated right. I took this out and this was kind of crumpled in there. It's not a very high quality spring, not at all. So in the picture I had on my community post, I did say, hint, hint, there is an upgrade. I had already known from a standpoint of these heads that the valve springs on these are pretty much worthless from everyone's reviews. And seeing I do want this engine to last and I do want it to work right, I went ahead and called Howard's Cams, which I am running a Howard's camshaft, and I did order their valve spring set. It seems to be a much better design. The actual retainer, the weight difference, you can't really tell, but the weight difference in these seem to be a lot stronger. The actual machining difference in here is also slightly different. So you have this one here and this one here, and while they look almost identical, you can see how this is tapered at the bottom for that dampener, and this one is just straight. And here across the bottom, not a whole lot of difference in them, but I can tell you right now, just by like the quality of the metallurgy, this one seems to be quite a bit more rigid. Now, side-by-side comparison of the spring, obviously this one's compressed a little bit more. This one is a lot more solid compared to this one. I actually, when I looked at these, we're going to do a spring rate test, but everything I read online about the Speedmaster springs is correct. They're junk. Not going to use them. Howard's, they have a good, reputable name. My machinist, he's been using Howard's cams for a long time, and these are what he suggested. So when I called him, they had them. I got a set. So this is going to be the first upgrade, in my opinion, that is a must for the Speedmaster heads, is definitely different valve springs. Now, let's get into that a little bit. The valves itself aren't terrible. I went ahead and pulled a couple of them. A little dirty right now, but you know, these aren't bad. Stainless steel valve, machine work on them seems to be pretty good. I'm not actually disappointed with these. So I'm going to go ahead and run the stainless valves that come with these. They do look a little rough on the machining, but I'm not really worried about that too much. I'm a little bit more concerned on how these are going to seal. So we're just going to go ahead and stick with the stock Speedmaster valves. So what's the next step? Let's go ahead and take a little deeper look into the combustion chamber. So I went ahead and removed one of the springs on the springs on the actual combustion chamber, just to get a little bit closer of a look at what do we actually have going on here. So let me get this adjusted a little bit better and kind of give you more of an in-depth look of what my initial visual observations are. Now, we did talk about casting and all that and how these actually look. So just to give you guys a look in here, they're not actually that bad. I can kind of see up through here in the runner and look at everything where the valve guide is. There's not a whole lot of material that can be taken out up in here around the valve guides, but there's a little smoothing work that can be done. Now, on this one here, you can see there is quite a bit of a little ridge, like right there. My opinion, that would need to be cleaned up. If you're going to want these heads to flow a lot better, there's quite a bit of material back up in here that you can take out, and also along here. I wouldn't go crazy with these, considering they are a budget-oriented head, but going through here and just feeling, there's some rough spots. So while they're not the Edelbrock quality head on these, they're actually not that bad. I'm going to go ahead and use these. I'm going to run them, and we're going to find out how they actually work. So what are my exact thoughts on these heads? If I was to rate them, I'm going to give them a B. You know, they're not bad, they're not terrible, but at the same time, they're not the most high quality things either. We'll know more once we get into it with the machine shop. They'll be able to explain kind of a little more in depth on the actual chambers, so you're seeing them if there's any leak down or anything like that. But this was a video just to kind of highlight some of the physical attributes of the head, what my initial thoughts were, along with stuff that I had researched online. They're very high quality cast for a budget-oriented head. I really didn't see, as far as casting, much different than the Edelbrocks. I think the people online were right, that these are just a knockoff Edelbrock. You know, that being said, you do get what you pay for. I'm not going to say, hey, go out and get these over the Edelbrocks, slap them on, and you'll be happy. I don't know. We haven't tried them yet. But from the get-go, I can tell you right now, stock valve springs on these are an absolute no-no. Upgrade, according to what your cam manufacturer says, you'll be much better off. I haven't ordered any guide plates yet or any push rods, anything like that. But I can tell you this much, I am going to go with Scorpion 1.73 ratio roller rockers on it. We're going to get it all set up, hopefully this weekend, because we're going to be assembling the 521. But overall, I'm actually not too disappointed in these heads. Like I said before, they did save me over $1,400 with getting the actual valve springs and stuff like that. You know, saved me over $1,200. That money I was able to use and put into a tunnel ram, new carburetors, linkage, and all that. So like I said, I'm on a budget. It is what it is. Everything looks pretty decent. I'm not going super high compression, a super high lift. I think these will be great for a street and strip application. I want to know your thoughts and comments, or thoughts and suggestions, and put them in the comments. I'm not an expert on heads. That's why I've got Jimmy, who's been a machinist, a drag racer, and a builder for years. I know enough to be dangerous, and really, when you look at something, you can see, if you know anything about engineering or you know anything about the automotive world, if something is cast as junk or if it might be even quality or not. So I'm going to go ahead and give these a B straight out of the box. They're definitely not A quality, but I'm going to give them a B. because they're good castings. Seem to be pretty solid. The ports aren't terrible. They do need to be cleaned up. And, you know, what do you guys think? You let me know. And the part 2 of this, don't know when it's going to happen, but we'll go more in depth with these heads with the machinist. Catch you soon. Later.